Oh, not too shabby. You know, I wouldn't kill you to give me a compliment now and then.
Lord Gojo!
Receiving thought communication from Rhonda. Vocal tone indicates it is a request for aid.
With this sacred treasure, I said it!
I will castrate him if he tries to summon Maharaga. Oh, God. Oh, thank God I got here in time.
Lord Rimuru, it's you! Did you come to save us?
Yeah, well, I guess so. Might as well. Guess you don't need any healing, though.
Oh, come on, please! I didn't even summon the Opstopper!
Fine. What a whiner.
I'll remember this as long as I live! That mask! You'll die for what you did! Ogre Flame!
Oh, that's cute.
Is he dead?
Womp. Have these things ever actually worked for you?
No way! How is that possible?
Although, I guess everyone underestimates each other.
My
Isn't
blades!
that right? I guess I'll give you a little treat as a reward. A little taste of real power.
Domain expansion. Infinite void. Throughout all heavens and earths, I alone am the honored one. Hey guys, and welcome back to Volume 2 for That Time Gojo. Satoru Gojo got reincarnated as a slime. If you guys haven't seen the first part and caught this by YouTube's luck or just random, make sure to go back and check that first one out. It's pretty good, I do say so myself, and at least 149 other people agree so, since we did hit the like goal of 100 likes. So here is the Volume 2 that I promised. I hope you guys enjoy it, and let's get started. Rimuru last time had just defeated Ifrit, and also devoured Shizu, putting her to rest, allowing her to rest within Gojo, and have him give her some comfort, instead of being left in this unsavory fantasy world that she so despised. Since then, Gojo had said farewell to the adventurers from Bloomend, who returned back to let them know about this mysterious slime who's living with these goblins in this peaceful village in the great forest of Jura. In the days since Rimuru's consumption, or Gojo's consumption of Shizu and Ifrit, he had attained a whole variety of new skills. Basically, an entire new playbook that he had never seen before. The ability to use and control flames. This was something that some other Jujutsu sorcerers had had in his past life, like Ryuman Sukana's Fugo, Jogo the Mountainous Curse Spirit, and a few other various flame Jujutsu techniques. But this was the first time that Gojo himself was going to be using it. To get a better grip on how to use his magicule and his skills correctly, he would return to Veldor's cave, where there was a high magicule count and density so he couldn't hurt anyone, and begin training on the control and usage of these new black flames and black lightning. These two skills were skills he had learned after he had become the chief of the Direwolves, which had evolved into the Gojo Wolves in this timeline, alongside the goblins. After this, Gojo would be experimenting with these, developing new techniques involving flame control and his Limitless. Some examples of this are using blue to create pockets of flames, so he can generate the flames inside of Limitless and use it like a trap. Similar to how Gojo defends himself by covering his body with his curse technique, he could cover someone else with this. Essentially, he can put infinity covering it around someone and then fill that infinite space with flames, using his magicules. But regardless, it was on any other normal day where he and his goblin hunting party would have been out and about, with him in the Veldor's cave, checking out the new look he's gained with the clothing that the goblins had made with Kaijin and the other dwarves, as well as Shizu's mask. When Gojo placed the mask over himself, his presence seemed to completely vanish. All of his power, his cursed energy, completely stopped. It all stopped leaking out of his body. This was pretty impressive, needless to say. And so Gojo decided to keep the mask to use it for whenever he would be entering any towns, both for his benefit and to avoid scaring anybody. It was at this point that the clip from the beginning of this video would occur, with Ranga reaching out to Gojo and calling for help, with the goblin hunting party having been intercepted by a mysterious band of strangers. Of course, Gojo wouldn't know this yet. This is when Great Sage would notify him, alerting him to the panic in Ranga's voice. Gojo would run out of the cave, sprinting as he goes from tree to tree in the forest, eventually finding Gobta having just been slashed. Gojo would leap in front of Gobta on the ground, asking him if he's alright, seeing that Gobta had tried to summon some shadows to attack them, but had failed, with him still being fairly inexperienced. Gojo would then put a potion on Gobta, healing his wound and his slash. Gobta would thank Master Gojo, saying, "I won't forget this as long as I live." Anyway, Gojo would just tell him it's no biggie, walking up and helping Ranga and Rigurd, the last two remaining standing members of the party. And so the battle against the ogres would begin. After hearing the update on how the battle had gone so far, Gojo would instruct Ranga and Rigurd to take down the pink-haired ogre, while he would take on the others. "But that leaves 5 ogres for you to take on, Master. Are you really capable of that?" Ranga would ask. Gojo would nod, smiling, saying this will be a cinch, saying that he doesn't want to kill them. He thinks something else is going on here, realizing the huge power gap between these ogres and his hunting party from the village. Gojo would immediately hop into battle, almost teleporting past Benimaru's slash and taking out Shion in an instant. Just using punches and kicks and blasting her away, she would slam into a tree, being knocked unconscious. Next, the ogre, who would become to known as Soe, would attack with a piercing strike of his blade. The sword would stop in midair as he forced with all of his might, the sword not even budging, towards Gojo's face. The blue-haired masked Majin would simply walk towards Soe as he gets pushed further and further back, realizing he can't even touch him, as he gets forced into the tree and broken against a tree branch, knocked unconscious. Gojo would then use one of his new skills, the monstrous ability of Poisonous Breath, from the centipede within the cave that he had found Veldora in. He would use this to take out the one who would become known as Kurobe one day, knocking him unconscious and leaving him face to face with the one who would become Benimaru and Hakuro. The two would stand up, saying that they won't allow him to do this any longer, saying that they're going to avenge their village and their comrades. Benimaru being stunned and unable to accept the huge gap in strength between themselves and this Majin. Gojo would laugh, rubbing the back of his head, saying he thinks that there's a misunderstanding going on here, but if they insist, this is when Hakuro would teleport behind him, trying to cut off his head. In the original, Rimuru's arm would have been cut off at this point, even with his body armor he had added to himself. Gojo, without any body armor on, would simply stand there. Hakuro's blade, once again like Soe's, stopping in mid-air and being pushed back. Gojo would turn, lifting his leg and kicking Hakuro in the stomach, knocking the old man back as he sprawls onto the ground. "Okay, Gramps, I think that's enough from you." The red-haired ogre, the last remaining one, would be in a state of panic, frozen in shock, as Shuna would scream out saying, "Wait," telling Benimaru not to attack and lose his life, knowing that Gojo wouldn't hesitate, Gojo having a steely coolness in his eyes. The pink-haired ogre would run in front, shielding her arms out between her brother, who Gojo had heard her just call, and himself. The pink-haired ogre would then say that this must not be the man they're looking for, asking why. Why would he be the master of those pigs, those orcs who had come and attacked them? Why would he command them to do this when he can so easily take them all out, having not even taken a scratch against all 5 of them, the most elite from the ogre clan? Even with the rest of their village, there's no way they could stand up to someone with this much power. It's at this point that Hakuro would have gone up and lunged towards Gojo, telling the two to get out of there and run, saying for him to take the princess and leave. Gojo would smirk as he holds up his fingers, crossing his pointer finger over his middle one, and creating a strange B-letter shape. At this point, he would open his eyes turning into a blue light from the yellow gold that they were once before, and saying, "Domain expansion. Infinite void." Immediately, everyone in the area would be sucked into Infinite Void, with him using it to overload Hakuro, Benimaru, and Shuna. He would end the domain expansion with everyone in the area being knocked out besides Rigurd, Gobta, and Ranga. He would then order them to pick up the ogres, saying to take them back to the village, saying that he wants to talk to them after they've cooled their heads down. Gojo said they'll probably recover in 3 to 6 days, having only opened it for 0.5 seconds, not really even getting serious. After a couple days, the ogres would come to, and having seen that they were still alive, would explain their story to Rimuru Gojo, explaining to this strange Majin and asking if he really wasn't the one to attack them. In response, Gojo would merely offer the mask that Chizu had left here, asking if it seemed familiar to them. This is when they would look at it, analyzing it, and realizing that it's not quite the same, with this mask having a magic suppression ability that hides your presence. The Majin from before that they had sensed did not have such an ability. Upon realizing that these monsters don't have names either, this is when Gojo would decide to name the Kijin if they became his subordinates, with Benimaru thinking it over and agreeing. The names we're going to say are the same for this sake, just like with the goblins. After Gojo would wake up, he would get an announcement from Great Sage, who he would ask why the hell he was knocked unconscious for. Great Sage would explain to Gojo that naming monsters who are superior to oneself would cause you to use up more magicules, saying that he had used up all of his magic power and had gone unconscious. Gojo would scoff, saying that's the kind of things you should be telling me before I do something rash. Great Sage would sigh, telling Gojo that he's just too reckless. It's after this point that he would talk of Shuna, Benimaru, Soe, and Kurobe and Hakuro. He would hear that while he was unconscious, a group from the Lizardmen villages had approached the Goblin tribes and were trying to persuade them to join their war effort against the mysterious threat of these orcs that were consuming villages. Gojo would sit up with a start, if you can sit up, as he turns back from his slime form into his human form. Gojo would laugh at the offer that they had told him about, saying that the Lizardmen are unnecessary for their victory. Gojo would say that if the orcs came here, he would just wipe them out all by himself. Then, thinking back on it as he remembers himself getting cut in half by Sukuna, would sigh, as he says that maybe it's not such a bad idea to work with everyone else. With Gojo accepting that they can look into a joint alliance with the Lizardmen, not seeking to bow down to anyone. It's around this point that Trainee, the Dryad, would come to Gojo, asking him to borrow his strength for the Forest of Jura and take down this monstrous threat of the Orc Disaster. She would begin to explain that the Orc Disaster is a Demon Lord level class monster, a unique monster that can rarely ever appear, but can consume everything. Gojo would hold a hand up to his chin thinking about it for a moment, wondering about what he should do here. Although he's never run away from a strong opponent before, he doesn't feel like doing others' dirty work anymore, especially after what had happened to him in his last life, when he worked for that Jujutsu Society. He'd smirk, telling the Dryad that he'll take out the threat, but only for his own gain. Trainee would smile with her eyes closed, saying that's perfectly acceptable. Meanwhile, within the Lizardman lands, Gabiru had already taken over control from his father, claiming his net legendary spear that deemed him king, and was ordering his troops to advance, which would only feed the growing army, making them more powerful. All of this going on under the watchful eye of Demon Lord Clayman. The battle would begin, the Lizardmen being devoured by the army of orcs, who had moved into the Great Forest after they had been kicked into the wastelands, their people having to eat each other to survive. When the masked Majin had approached them, offering them a future, this hadn't been what they had in mind. But it was too late. The Orc Lord had already used its telekinetic power and ability to control the hundreds of thousands of orcs all around them, forcing them to feast on their dead comrades, absorbing their strength, and becoming even more powerful under this unique monster's unique abilities. As the Lizardmen are getting defeated, suddenly flames would cover the battlefield as the Kijin would arrive, with Gojo floating above them. Gojo's hair would be flowing in the wind, long with a silvered gleam, as he looks across the field with his 6 eyes, using Great Sage to analyze all the orcs to find his opponent. As the army of orcs would draw closer, this is when Gojo would release his black flames and black lightning, casting them down upon the land and killing hundreds in a single attack. Gojo would finally meet his eyes with the Orc Disaster, the unique monster who was the cause of this entire mess, at least for now. Gojo would teleport forward right into his face directly in the orc's mouth, as he'd pull his right fist back, connecting it with the orc's jaw. With infinity coating his fist, the cursed energy would pound into this orc, causing its fat rolls to wrinkle, getting folded onto the ground, as the mass of flesh gets sent flying from Gojo's punches. As it gets sent flying, Gojo would hold up his hand, as he envisions in his mind 2 different energies colliding, blue and red, creating the imaginary attack, Hollow Purple. He would pull his fingers out, pulling his other arm back as if though he was cocking a shell into an armistice, blasting the Orc Disaster with a full power Hollow Purple. The Kijin and the Lizardman would be shocked, watching as a hole the size of a cannonball appears, ripping through the Orc Disaster's torso and right arm. The Orc Disaster would rage, ripping down with its other hands it begins consuming its fellow brethren around it, healing as a disgusting fleshy sound of crunching and bone would fill the air. Its own flesh beginning to regenerate from its gluttony. The Orc Disaster would rage, saying he's going to eat him, as he runs forward at full speed towards Gojo. Gojo would stand there as he tries to wrap his mouth around the slime, with Gojo saying the only one here who's going to be eaten is you, transforming out of his human form into the blue slime figure and using Predator. Gojo would begin to coat the Orc Disaster with his slime, slowly devouring his flesh faster than he can regenerate. The Orc Disaster would try peeling Gojo off, ripping at the slime, but couldn't even grab him as it wriggled around on his flesh, consuming him slowly, as if though two beasts were in the forest, fighting for survival. The screams of the Orc Disaster could be heard as its flesh and bone became one, cleaned bones appearing on its hand and arms, its limbs being slowly eaten inwards by Gojo, who would consume its power, its skills, and the Orc Disaster's soul. In this fashion, the orcs would be released from the control of the unique monster, as Gojo would add a Demon Lord seed into himself, giving himself the ability in the future to evolve into a true Demon Lord, as well as attaining a variety of other skills possessed by the orcs, and the unique skill of the Orc Disaster. Clayman, who had been watching through this crystal ball, would be angered, watching his plan completely fall apart to this random slime. Clayman would pound his hand into the desk, screaming that his plan was getting overturned. No matter. If this way isn't working, I'll just have to try another approach. With the war having ended, Gojo having succeeded, and the goblin village he was a part of now being hailed as heroes, the Kijin would return back with Gojo. And in the weeks to come, many of the lizard men, such as Gabiru and those who had joined him in the coup, would have been sent there as outcasts. The decision of what to do with the remaining orcs was now what was on the table. The Great Jura Alliance would be brought up, with them deciding what to do as the races who live in this forest. Ultimately, Benimaru would leave it up to Gojo as his master to decide what to do with the orcs, with Gojo voting that they should keep them as a labor force, saying that if they get rid of them or kill them all, it'll just mean more work for those who had survived, saying that they should earn their redemption by their own two hands. And now in the weeks after, the orcs would have helped refix the marshes they had themselves destroyed, while also being taken under Gojo's wing, with Gojo beginning road construction between his town and Worgon. In just these few weeks and months, the city of Gojo would have grown in massive ways, with him even having drawn the attention of Demon Lord Carrion, the Beastmaster and a Demon Lord from the neighboring country of Eurazania. Of course, he also had drawn attention from multiple other Demon Lords after they had witnessed his battle against the Orc Disaster, the first to come and visit herself being Milim Nava. One day, Gojo's Six Eyes and Great Sage would go off as he detects a large amount of magicules heading his way. He would immediately teleport to get out of the city, knowing that they're coming after him, wondering what this is. An insane smile would flicker on his face, as the magicules would crash into the ground, causing a huge crater to form near the tree where he and Shizu had spent moments talking about Japan and their last life. Of course, without the cursed spirits and stuff. When the pink-haired Lolly Demon Lord arrives, Gojo would have an insane grin on his face, as he licks his lips, practically thinking, "This is gonna be one hell of a fight." Rising out of the crater, this pink-haired Twin-Tails girl would start laughing maniacally. Suddenly, Shion, Shuna, and Benimaru would appear, with them lunging at Gojo, pulling him out of the way, and telling Rango to take their master and flee. The Kijin would be easily blasted away. Gojo would grit his teeth, saying to get out of there, saying he's got this, as he stands up, brushing the dust off of his clothes. In the weeks since the Orc Disaster's fall, he had commissioned Shuna, who was actually fairly good at weaving and creating clothing. As it turns out, she had been working with materials back in the original Ogre Village. She had created a new outfit for Gojo. Gojo having a black jacket with a button on top, similar to that of the outfit he wore as a teacher and sensei at Jujutsu High. This was what was most comfortable for him, and he was happy to be wearing the familiar outfit once again. Although this time, as he was now more relaxed and didn't have students following him everywhere, aside from Gabta, who was getting trained by both him and Hakuro in swordsmanship and him teaching him the 10 Shadows technique, slowly, Gojo would wear it a bit differently, with his button being unbuttoned and having an undershirt underneath, making it look more like a overcoat than a buttoned-up, tight-knit jacket. But regardless of his looks, Milim would be there for one thing and one thing only. That being a fight, a magnificent duel between the hero who had slain the Orc Disaster and her, one of the 10 great demon lords. Milim would then aim a Drago Buster at Gojo. Gojo would stand there as the attack would come closer to his face, with him tanking it with infinity, completely unfazed by the attack. Great Sage would be screaming in Gojo's head about how stupid and reckless this was, with Gojo smirking and saying it was worth testing. As he smirks, telling Great Sage that there's no risk, no reward. He'd hold his finger out at the giggling Demon Lord as he then says, "Red," blasting Milim into the atmosphere with a red attack. Milim would laugh, not having so much fun in ages, barely even being scratched by the technique. Gojo would teleport above her using a double hammer fist on her back, her spine getting turned upwards as she gets sent flying back towards the ground. Milim would laugh, releasing her Drago Buster again with more power, this time releasing multiple shots as Gojo would feel the infinity cracking, just like as if though she was using a simple domain, simply outperforming his energy consumption with her magical energy. Insane. Gojo would teleport out of the way as he's thinking about using a domain expansion, wondering if he could even beat her using a domain. It's at this point that Gobta would show up carrying honey freshly farmed from their new bee culturing zone. Milim would turn at wondering what the hell that yellow stuff was, with Gojo looking panicked, saying, No, that's my dessert research." The look of horror on his face would make Milim even more interested, as she then blitzes speeding past Gojo and towards Gobta. Gobta, who would have been just about to bite into the honey, licking his fingers, would scream as he sees the flying object coming towards him at Mach 10. She would crash face first into the jar, licking her face as she feels what this strange attack is, wondering what this delicious substance is. And she would completely forget about their fight. Gojo would have his hands shaking as he feels like he could have totally died just then, falling back to the ground and walking up telling Milim that if she destroys his town, there won't be anything good like that honey left to eat. She would lick her lips saying there's more good food here, realizing that she must be completely uncultured, as he pats her on the back, seeing her more like a kid, sighing as he says, "Alright, let's go get some lunch." If you guys want to see That Time Gojo Got Reincarnated as a Slime Volume 3, make sure to get this video to at least, let's say 150 likes, since that's about how much the first video was about to get. If you guys can breach 150 likes, then you'll definitely get a third volume of the series as soon as possible. Otherwise, I got some other videos like I mentioned last time that I'm working on in the background, so you guys should be looking forward to those. Thank you so much, and if you want to see more, you know what to do.